My name is Cameron, and I was raised in a star's shadow. Lily, my elder sister, was that star. There were always a lot of people in our house, uncles, aunts, cousins, you name it. Attracted by the prospect of my mom's delectable barbecue and the opportunity to watch Lily sing, they would swarm into our backyard like ants to a picnic. Our backyard, with its well-manicured lawn and large oak tree serving as the ideal background, seemed a lot like a stage. Mom would run about making sure everyone had a drink in hand while Dad fired up the grill, filling the air with the aroma of sizzling meat and charcoal. Lily, sweetie. With a voice that broke through the commotion, Aunt Marge would scream out, "Why don't you give us a little song?" And all eyes would suddenly go to my sister. With a naughty twinkle in her eye and her golden locks bouncing, Lily would leap onto a chair. She would theatrically clear her throat, and then magic. She would croon, giving her best Celine Dion imitation, "My heart will go on and on." The grown-ups would go crazy, applause and clapping, as if they were witnessing a live performance. With delight, Mom and Dad would grin, with Dad frequently removing a tear from his eye. I would be out to the side, attempting to disappear into the bushes in the meanwhile. My voice sounded like a cat being strangled every time I tried to sing, not that I didn't want to participate. And verse? Ignore it. My lips would tangle with the words, making me flushed and unable to speak clearly. My family have whispered to me that I'm really different from my sister. Not just the family members were involved. Mom and Dad made it obvious who was the highlight of the group. I was left on my own as Lily was rushed from dancing sessions to singing lessons to painting workshops. Not that it bothered me too much. The worn-out books that covered our shelf gave me comfort. Great Aunt Maggie was the only one who appeared to understand me. I would be hiding behind the garage or up in the treehouse, nose deep in a book, when she would discover me. She would settle down next to me and ask, "What adventure are you on today, Cameron?" I would gaze up, appreciative of the disruption. "Oh, I was just reading about ancient Egypt," I would respond, pointing to my most recent discovery's cover. Maggie's eyes would sparkle as she nodded. "Girl, you have a sound head on your shoulders. Never listen to someone who says otherwise." Those times I spent with Maggie were like a breath of fresh air. She didn't demand me to be someone I wasn't, or to act. I could just be Cameron with her, the shy, bookish girl who liked the solitude of pen and paper more than the hubbub of family get-togethers. Even though I treasured such times, being the child who was ignored still hurt. My parents would shower Lily with praise and presents whenever she conquered a new song or received an accolade. She could have the newest technology, stylish clothes, or anything else she wanted. And me. I received hand-me-downs and frustrated sighs. My haven became school. I wasn't quite Miss Popularity, but in the course I was able to settle in. I wasn't going to sit there and let the teachings pass through my mind. No, I was committed to understanding all of the information provided by the professors. "Mrs. Thompson," I would say quietly but firmly after class, "will you please repeat that explanation of mitosis? It wasn't fully clear to me." She would grin, clearly appreciating my curiosity. "Naturally, Cameron. How about we discuss it together?" I would ask a teacher for book recommendations if she didn't have the time. My rucksack soon began to overflow with additional reading material. I used to stay up late reading such books, wanting to become an expert in every field. Your efforts have paid off. I was at the top of my class by the time I started high school. I excelled at anything for once in my life. I even made a few bookish pals who tolerated my reserved demeanor. As graduation drew near, Lily Central took over our home. Her mother was always assisting her to put together her portfolio for some posh college's advertising and PR program. "Oh, honey, this campaign idea is perfect. When Mom saw Lily's work, she would get very excited. "You're so talented." I would close my eyes, go to my room, and immerse myself in my work. However, something inside of me gave out one evening over yet another family meal focused on Lily's college plans. I exclaimed, "I'm going to college too. I want to study management." There was an unbearable quiet for a while. Then they all started laughing, which shocked and pained me. Mom responded, blotting away her tears, "Oh, sweetie, we don't have money for that. After graduation, a job will need to be obtained. Simply put, you lack your sister's talent." It seemed as if someone had smacked me. But I'm the top student in my class. My cheeks scarlet with humiliation and rage, I mumbled, "I get straight A's." After storming up to my room, I slammed my report card onto the table. Their surprised eyes widened as they all leaned in to have a closer look. Dad scratched his head and murmured, "Well, I'll be damned. When did this happen?" "It's been happening for years." I spit out, "Not that any of you ever noticed." At least Mom had the grace to appear embarrassed. "Cameron, we had no idea." But Dad interrupted her. "Look, nothing is altered by it. Our whole savings has gone into Lily's schooling. Cameron, there is nothing left for you." I apologize, but it is the reality. After graduation, you'll start working at my cousin Frank's restaurant. I turned and ran, ignoring their calls. I sprinted up the stairs into my room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. As I collapsed onto my bed, sobs racking my body, I felt something inside me harden. Fine, I thought, my hands clenching into fists. If they won't help me, I'll find another way. I'll show them all what Cameron can do. The next few months were a blur. Lily headed off to college, her departure marked by tearful goodbyes and proud parental embraces. Meanwhile, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor, determined to graduate at the top of my class. During this time, I found myself spending more and more time with Great Aunt Maggie. Her small cozy house became my refuge from the tension at home. One afternoon, as we sat in her sunlit kitchen sipping tea, she asked a question I'd been dreading. "So Cameron," she said, her kind eyes fixed on me, "what are your plans after graduation?" I stared into my teacup, fighting back tears. "I don't know, Aunt Maggie. Mom and Dad won't help me with college. They say there's no money left after paying for Lily's education." Maggie was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Cameron, dear, I've got some savings. I'd like to give them to you for college. You're smart as a whip, and I'll be damned if I let that brain of yours go to waste." The reality of her words hit me like a tidal wave. I burst into tears, overwhelmed by her generosity, and the sudden realization that my dreams weren't dead after all. "Thank you," I sobbed, throwing my arms around her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Maggie." The months flew by, and before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, diploma in hand. As I scanned the crowd, I saw Aunt Maggie beaming at me. My parents were there too, looking proud but uncomfortable. That evening, as I pored over college brochures, Mom walked in. "Cameron, honey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "your father's cousin Frank called. He's got a waitressing job for you at his restaurant. Isn't that exciting?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mom, I won't be needing that job. I'm going to college." Dad appeared in the doorway, frowning. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for that?" "Aunt Maggie is helping me," I said, my chin held high. "She's giving me her savings for tuition." The shocked silence that followed was almost comical. Then, to my disbelief, Dad's face turned red with anger. "Absolutely not," he bellowed. "If Maggie's got money to spare, it should go to Lily. She needs a car for her job in advertising after she graduates next year. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? I spat. This is my chance to get an education, to make something of myself. Don't be selfish, Cameron, Mom chimed in. Your sister needs that money more than you do. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. This is my money now, and I'm using it for college. End of discussion. From that moment on, life at home became unbearable. My parents either ignored me completely or snapped at me over the smallest things. The tension was suffocating. After a particularly nasty argument, I called Aunt Maggie in tears and told her everything. Pack your bags, sweetheart, she said without hesitation. You're moving in with me. The next day, I stuffed everything I owned into a cab and drove away, watching my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror. As I pulled up to Aunt Maggie's house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The summer flew by in a whirlwind of preparation, and before I knew it, I was stepping onto the campus of State University. Thanks to my stellar grades and Aunt Maggie's generosity, I'd gotten into the management program I'd always dreamed of. On my first day of classes, I felt like I was floating on air as I sat in my introduction to business lecture, drinking in every word. I couldn't help but think, I made it. I'm really here. Meanwhile, Lily was starting her senior year at her fancy college. I hadn't heard much from her or my parents since I'd moved out, but I tried not to let it bother me. I was too busy reveling in my newfound freedom and the excitement of college life. But then, about a month into the semester, Aunt Maggie called me. Cameron, dear, she said, her voice hesitant. I think you should sit down for this. My heart raced as she filled me in on the family drama I'd missed. Apparently, Lily had shown up at home out of the blue, announcing she had dropped out of college. The reason? She was pregnant. According to Aunt Maggie, Lily had been flippant about the whole thing. Oh, don't worry, she'd said, tossing her hair. The baby's father is loaded. We'll be getting married soon. But the story didn't end there. It turned out Lily's boyfriend wasn't as committed as she thought. When he found out she'd been sleeping with his friend too, all hell broke loose. Now they didn't even know who the father was. Aunt Maggie sighed. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process it all. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. The golden child had fallen from her pedestal. But mostly, I just felt sad for Lily and the mess she'd gotten herself into. The saga continued over the next few months. Aunt Maggie kept me updated on all the gossip from the family gatherings. I no longer attended when Lily's baby was born. A DNA test confirmed her boyfriend was indeed the father, but instead of the fairy tale wedding Lily had envisioned, he simply agreed to pay child support. The final blow came when Lily, desperate for work, took a job as a waitress at Uncle Frank's restaurant, the very job my parents had tried to foist on me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. There was a small, petty part of me that wanted to gloat, to rub my success in my family's faces. But mostly I just felt a profound sense of gratitude for where I was and how far I'd come. Years flew by in a blur of lectures, exams, and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, my hard-earned management degree clutched tightly in my hand. As I scanned the crowd, I saw Aunt Maggie beaming at me, tears of pride in her eyes. Thanks to my top grades and glowing recommendations from my professors, I landed a job as a manager at the Gilded Fork, one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. The salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly successful. With my first paycheck, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I marched into the electronics store and bought the latest smartphone for Aunt Maggie. Her face lit up when I presented it to her. "Oh, Cameron," she gasped, turning the sleek device over in her hands. "This is too much." I grinned, already pulling out my own phone. "Not at all. Now let me show you how to use it." Over the next few weeks, I taught Aunt Maggie the ins and outs of social media. She took to it like a duck to water, especially loving Facebook's video feature. Soon her page was filled with clips of her garden, her cat, and her infamous apple pie in various stages of creation. I'd watch her videos during my lunch breaks, always making sure to leave a comment or a like. It was our way of staying connected, even when work kept me busy. One day, as I was preparing for the dinner rush, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, surprised to see my mother's name on the screen. We hadn't spoken in years. "Cameron." Her voice was hesitant. "We were hoping you might come over to talk." After a long pause, I agreed. That Sunday, I found myself standing on the porch of my childhood home, my hand hovering over the doorbell. Before I could press it, the door swung open. "Cameron," my mother pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetie, it's so good to see you." Inside, I found my father, Lily, and a toddler I assumed was my niece. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile, like I'd feared. "You look good, kiddo," Dad said, his voice gruff but warm. "We hear you're doing well for yourself." I nodded, still wary. "I am. I'm a manager at the Gilded Fork now." Their eyes widened at the name of the restaurant. Mom cleared her throat. "That's wonderful, dear. Actually, that's part of why we wanted to talk to you." Over the next hour, they apologized for how they treated me, admitting they'd been wrong to dismiss my potential. Then came the real reason for the reunion. "Cameron," Mom said, glancing at Lily. We were wondering if you might be able to help Lily get a job at your restaurant." I looked at my sister, bouncing her daughter on her knee. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally. "No promises, but I'll ask." True to my word, I spoke to Mr. Reeves, the restaurant owner, about Lily. To my surprise, he agreed to give her a shot as an administrator. Lily started the following week. I watched her closely, half expecting her to fail or cause drama, but to my shock, she excelled. She was punctual, efficient, and the customers loved her charm. As the weeks passed, I found myself relaxing around her. We weren't best friends by any means, but we developed a cordial working relationship. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, the universe decided to throw me another curveball, this time a positive one. Mr. Reeves called me into his office one day. My heart raced, wondering if I'd done something wrong. Instead, he grinned at me and said, "Cameron, how would you like to help me expand the business?" Before I knew it, I was overseeing the opening of not one, but 3 new restaurants. My days became a whirlwind of staff meetings, menu tastings, and number crunching. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and everything I'd ever dreamed of. The promotion came with a significant pay bump, and suddenly I found myself with more money than I knew what to do with. That's when the calls from my parents started. At first, it was just small things. "The roof is leaking," Mom would say, her voice hesitant. "We were wondering if you might be able to help out a little." I was surprised at how good it felt to say yes, to be able to solve their problems with a simple transfer of funds. It started with the roof, then it was a new water heater, and before long, I was funding a complete home renovation. As their financial situation improved, thanks to my monthly allowance, the infamous family party started up again. But this time when I attended, things were different. "Have you heard about Cameron's latest project?" Mom would gush to the relatives. "She's opening a new restaurant downtown. We're so proud of her." I'd catch Lily's eye across the room, and she'd give me a small smile. She was doing well too, having been promoted to head administrator at the Gilded Fork. My girls, Dad would say, an arm around each of us, both of them making their old man proud. Part of me wanted to be bitter, to remind them of how they treated me before, but a larger part reveled in the warmth of their approval, something I'd craved for so long. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. Finally, after all these years, I had what I'd always wanted: success in my career and the love and appreciation of my family. I was the golden child now, but better than that, I was my own woman, standing on my own 2 feet. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when my world came crashing down around me. I was scrolling through Facebook, sipping my coffee, when I saw that Aunt Maggie had posted a new video. It was from one of the family gatherings I'd missed due to work commitments. Smiling, I clicked play, expecting to see the usual scenes of laughter and merriment. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. There in living color were my parents, their faces flushed with alcohol and self-righteousness. Mom was gesticulating wildly, her voice slurred but unmistakable. Aunt Cameron, that ungrateful little freeloader, she was saying, "She barely gives us anything. We're not made of money, you know." Dad chimed in, his face red. "That's right. We're doing just fine, thanks to our Lily. She's the one keeping that fancy restaurant afloat. Cameron just rides on her coattails." The video continued with various relatives nodding along, some even adding their own criticisms. Lily sat in the corner, looking uncomfortable but not contradicting them. As the video ended, I sat there stunned. How could they, after everything I'd done for them, all the money I'd given them, how could they turn around and say such awful, untrue things? With shaking hands, I scrolled down to the comments. There I saw a stream of messages from my parents. "Maggie, delete this video right now. You had no right to post this. Take it down immediately." But Aunt Maggie's response made me burst into tears. I don't know how to delete videos, and even if I did, I wouldn't. It's time everyone saw the truth about how you treat Cameron. She's the one supporting you, and this is how you repay her kindness. Shame on you both. I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying the video, reading and rereading the comments. The betrayal cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had long since healed. Finally, I picked up my phone and dialed Aunt Maggie's number. "Oh, Cameron, dear," she said when she answered, her voice full of sympathy. "I take it you've seen the video." "Yeah," I croaked, my voice raw from crying. "I can't believe it, Aunt Maggie. How could they?" I could hear the anger in her voice as she replied, "They've always been like this, Cameron. You just hadn't been around to see it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but maybe it's for the best. You deserve to know the truth." We talked for hours, with Maggie comforting me as I cycled through shock, anger, and grief. As night fell, I made a decision. I'm cutting them off, I told Aunt Maggie, my voice firm despite the pain in my heart. No more money, no more help. They made their bed, now they can lie in it. The days following the video revelation were some of the hardest of my life. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their words, so cruel and untrue, played on a loop in my mind. Finally, after a week of silence, I sent them a brief text. "I've seen the video. I know what you really think of me. Don't contact me again. The money stops now." Their responses came flooding in immediately. At first, they were apologetic. "Cameron, sweetie, we're so sorry. We didn't mean any of it. Please forgive us." But as the days passed and I maintained my silence, their tune changed. "We're your parents. You owe us." Each message twisted the knife deeper, but I stood firm. I'd given them chance after chance, and they'd thrown it all back in my face. It was time to break the cycle. Lily surprisingly stayed out of it. At work, she was the model employee, efficient and professional. If she harbored any resentment over the loss of our parents' financial support, she didn't show it. Our interactions remained cordial but distant. After a staff meeting one day, she informed me, "I'm not taking sides. That is between the two of you." I nodded, grateful for her objectivity, but a part of me wanted she would defend me. However, I saw that she had her own child to consider. As the weeks stretched into months, I discovered that I was depending a lot on Aunt Maggie. Our Sunday video chats turned into my favorite part of the week. She would regale me with tales from her garden or her most recent baking endeavor, giving my chaotic existence a much-needed dose of normalcy. When concerns began to creep in, she would reassure me, "You're doing the right thing, Cameron." Avoid allowing them to control you any longer. I was surprised to hear from other relatives as well. I received a touching note from my cousin Sarah, who had always been friendly to me at family get-togethers. I watched the film. "Cameron, I want you to know how wonderful I believe you are. You are an inspiration, what you've accomplished, and how you've benefited everyone. Never listen to anyone who suggests different." Dad's brother, Uncle Bob, contacted me out of the blue. "Kid, I've watched you mature into this amazing woman. If your parents don't recognize how unique you are, they are idiots. Your family is on your side. Recall that." These encouraging remarks were like a salve to my hurting heart. It dawned on me that although my parents had passed away, I had been blessed with a family who valued my true self. I was summoned into Mr. Reeves's office as the year came to an end. I was anxious as I entered the room, wondering if the family turmoil had influenced how well I had done at work. Rather, he grinned widely and announced, "Cameron, I'm retiring next year. I would want you to become the group CEO for the restaurants." I was stunned into stillness as I stood there. At last, I stumbled over the words, "Are you sure?" With sparkling eyes, he nodded. Never in my life have I felt more certain about anything. "I know you deserve it, Cameron. It is because of you that this firm has prospered. It's time for you to assume control." I came to the deep realization that the young girl who had been disregarded and undervalued had grown into a lady who had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own, as I left his office, my brain whirling with possibilities.
"I've leveled your parents' home to build one for my parents." "What?" I was unable to grasp the situation immediately and looked utterly perplexed. "Kate, you look so bewildered." Apparently, my dumbfounded expression amused my in-laws, as they laughed. "What do you mean by leveling it to build a house for your parents?" "Well, that house will belong to you now that your parents have passed, right? I heard from Tyler that you live near your childhood home for that reason." "That's right. My brother lives far away and has no intention of taking it over. Your parents probably let you live nearby for you to inherit it, right?" It seems Tyler and his parents have misunderstood something. Wanting to clear up the misunderstanding quickly, I said, "What? That's not my house." At my response, Tyler and his parents were the ones looking confused this time. "What do you mean it's not your house?" After this, Tyler would face an incredible fate due to his mistake. I am Kate Baker, a 45-year-old housewife married for 10 years. My husband, Tyler, and I met through a family introduction. I had always wanted to continue working even after getting married, and Tyler fully understood that. Thus, although we married when I was 35, we have no children. Tyler had been a company employee in New York until we got married. In fact, he was about to be transferred to a local branch when we were introduced. It was perhaps coincidental, but for me, it was convenient as I could continue working without having to quit my job. I had lived at my parents' home until I got married, but after marriage, I started living in an apartment just a short walk from there. I have an older brother who is 10 years my senior. He started a business in New York and rarely comes back home. Being a workaholic like him, he is in his mid-50s and has never married. I have always followed in his footsteps. Thus, I also became as much of a workaholic as he is. However, recently, some troublesome people have started to interfere with my life. These are my in-laws who live in the neighboring state. My father-in-law worked until last year and retired at 75, while my mother-in-law, a housewife, goes wherever my father-in-law goes. They seem like a happily married couple at first glance. However, with my father-in-law's retirement, the troublesome behavior of these in-laws began. Despite being in his mid-70s, my father-in-law loves driving. He frequently visits our home, which is 10 miles away, often timing his visits to coincide with my return from work. This continued for more than half a year. One day, when I returned home late after overtime, my in-laws were there, drinking with Tyler as they waited. "Oh, Kate, you're late. We started dinner without you." He said this while eating the dinner I had prepared in advance. Moreover, when they visit on weekday nights, they plan to stay over from the beginning. Tyler, being their son, naturally stays up late drinking with them. Despite my fatigue, I have to entertain my in-laws. However, if this continues, it will affect my work. So, I waited until my in-laws had settled down for the night and quietly spoke to Tyler. "Hey, could you please limit your parents' visits to once or twice a month, only on weekends?" I tried asking him, but Tyler did not comply and looked displeased. "Come on. Dad worked hard until his mid-70s. Plus, he won't be able to drive for much longer. So, let him do as he pleases for now. Even so, I can't keep this up. It would be better if Dad went out somewhere else instead of just our place." As I countered, Tyler's mood worsened even more. Then, with a click of his tongue, he went into the bedroom where his parents were sleeping. I had to clean up alone after everyone had finished drinking. As I was tidying up, I heard Tyler's voice from the bedroom. He was apparently still awake and talking to his mother. "Mom, Kate's been saying she doesn't want you coming over too much." Although Tyler looked displeased, he seemed to understand. However, I wondered what his mother thought of the way he asked. It must have sounded like I was treating my in-laws poorly. Just then, Tyler came out of the bedroom. "Kate. Mom's calling you." As I expected, his mother was upset, and I ended up having to listen to her nag. "Kate. You live near your own parents and disregard your husband's? What kind of attitude is that?" "No, that's not what I meant." I regretted having asked Tyler for help. After a while, my mother-in-law's nagging continued. "Besides, you're our daughter-in-law, yet why are you living near your parents' home? You should be living near us, that's only proper." That's because Tyler's and my company are close from here. No matter how I explained, my mother-in-law only responded with, "All you have are excuses." I was stuck listening to this until past 1 a.m., even though I had work the next day. However, for a while after that, my in-laws did not visit our house. They seemed to understand a bit, complaining as they did, and I was relieved and focused on my work. But a few months later, I suddenly received a call from my mother-in-law. Breathing heavily, she said, "What's wrong, Mother?" "Kate. Come to your parents' house right away. Your mother has suddenly collapsed." "My parents' house? Why are you there?" I couldn't comprehend the situation immediately and my mind went blank. However, my mother-in-law was clearly in a panic and kept talking. "Never mind that now. Just come quickly." Urged by my mother-in-law, I hurriedly left the house. If my mother really had collapsed, I needed to call an ambulance. Although my parents' house was only about a 5-minute walk, I drove there in my haste. When I arrived, an ambulance was already parked in front of the house. I immediately got out of the car and rushed toward the ambulance. "Mom." Hearing my voice, my in-laws turned to look at me. "Ah, Kate, you're just in time. Get on the ambulance and accompany your mother. I was already planning to do so, but what on earth had happened? My father was already inside the ambulance. Dad, what happened? My father looked down quietly and said, Your mother has been enduring a lot of pain. Enduring? What has she been enduring? Before I could ask further, the ambulance arrived at the hospital. As my mother was taken into the treatment room, my father explained the situation to me, and I felt a tightness in my chest. It was my fault for asking my in-laws not to visit our house too often. Since then, they had been visiting my parents' house instead. And they had been telling my mother that I was being cruel to them, complaining endlessly about my lack of discipline. My gentle-natured mother didn't talk back, just apologized to my in-laws. For several months, my overbearing in-laws continued visiting my parents' house frequently. My mother, trying to be hospitable, ended up cooking dinner and even hosting them overnight. The stress from this reached its peak and caused her sudden collapse. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I had been focusing on my work, relieved that my in-laws had stopped visiting us. I had no idea that my parents' home was going through such an ordeal. I was furious with myself for not having visited my parents more often. All of this happened because of me. No, it's not your fault. Your mother had a chronic illness, it's not something you could have controlled. My father comforted me, though he was probably the one who felt the worst. All I could do was pray for my mother's recovery. However, despite our prayers, my mother passed away that night. The funeral was attended only by close relatives, including my brother who had rushed from New York after hearing of her critical condition. Tyler missed the funeral citing urgent work, and my in-laws, despite being informed of the time and place, did not show up. My father, having lost his beloved partner, was enveloped in grief. I gently called out to my father. Dad, are you going to be okay on your own? Maybe it's time I started living with you. My father looked up and responded gently. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine alone. You should continue living with Tyler as you have been. As he said this, my father had a complicated expression on his face. The truth is, my father honestly found Tyler difficult to deal with. For that reason, he was inwardly pleased by my words, but he had no choice but to refuse. Tyler also had work as an excuse, but it was likely he just didn't want to face my father. After the funeral, I made sure to visit my father as often as possible. It seemed that even my in-laws had stopped visiting my parents' home after my mother's passing. I resolved to do my best to care for my father as I couldn't for my mother. Yet, without ever overcoming his grief, my father quietly passed away soon after my mother. Tyler and my in-laws did attend his funeral. His funeral was attended by over 40 people, including his former colleagues. While everyone mourned his passing, my in-laws were somewhat out of place, bombarding me with questions about the family home during the service. Kate, how many square meters was your family home? You mentioned it's been in the family for generations, but how many exactly? The house seems to have been rebuilt, but when was that? Other attendees looked on coldly, but my in-laws didn't seem to care about the surroundings. While mindful of the other attendees, I whispered to my in-laws. Please, let's talk about this after the funeral. After making my request, my in-laws silently sulked. Following the funeral, I took some time off to visit my brother to discuss what to do with the family home. Tyler was supposed to join me, but he couldn't take time off from work, so I went alone. My brother was puzzled to see me by myself. What happened to Tyler? Even if he can't stay for a few days, he should at least be able to make it today. I can't believe he's that busy with work. That made me think too. Maybe Tyler is just pretending to be busy to suit his own needs. My brother laughed in agreement. Probably. He might just not want to deal with the hassle. I laughed along with him, feeling a sense of relief, and decided to spend a week there using up all my remaining paid leave. After discussing everything thoroughly, including the house and property where I grew up, I left my brother's house. I had planned to head straight home, but there was still time until evening. So, I decided to head to my parents' house, which I hadn't yet begun to sort through. However, as I approached my childhood home, I was shocked by an unexpected sight. The land where the house should have been was completely cleared. Thinking, no way. I parked the car in front and looked around. No matter where I looked, there was no trace of my childhood home left. I decided to inform Tyler immediately and returned to our house. There, not only Tyler but also my in-laws were present. I had rushed up the stairs to our third-floor apartment, so I was out of breath. Seeing me like this, my mother-in-law grinned and spoke. "Oh, Kate. What's the matter? Why such a rush?" Mother, no, it's Tyler. It's serious." As I said that, Tyler appeared. "What, you're back already? More importantly, what's so serious?" Our family home, when I went there, it was gone." As I said this breathlessly, Tyler and my in-laws burst out laughing. "And here I was wondering why you were in such a panic. That was it? I've leveled your parents' home to build one for my parents." What? I was unable to grasp the situation immediately and looked utterly perplexed. "Kate, you look so bewildered." Apparently, my dumbfounded expression amused my in-laws, as they laughed. "What do you mean by leveling it to build a house for your parents?" As I asked this with a pale face, my father-in-law answered. "Well, that house will belong to you now that your parents have passed, right? I heard from Tyler that you live near your childhood home for that reason." "That's right. My brother lives far away and has no intention of taking it over. Your parents probably let you live nearby for you to inherit it, right?" I again looked confused. However, this wasn't because I couldn't grasp the situation, but because I was dumbfounded by the gross misunderstanding of Tyler and my in-laws. Yet Tyler continued speaking, ignoring my reaction. "Anyway, the sooner the better. If it's going to be Kate's house, it's mine too. So, it was good that I decided to demolish it, right?" As Tyler asked this, I tried to clear up the misunderstanding quickly. "What? That's not my house." At my reply, this time Tyler and my in-laws looked confused. "Huh? What do you mean it's not your house?" "What I mean is, the land has been in my family for generations, but the house is registered in my brother's name." As I explained this, Tyler turned pale. Our parents had decided that the eldest son, my brother, would inherit the house, even though he lived far away. That's why I moved out when I got married. My parents had also mentioned that it wouldn't be appropriate for my sister-in-law and her husband to live in the house that my brother might return to. When we got married, I'm sure I told you that, Tyler. I really don't remember that. Tyler continued looking pale and unsure of what to do. My in-laws, concerned by his appearance, spoke up. "What's wrong, Tyler? You look pale. Is there some problem with that house? If it belongs to Kate's brother, we can negotiate, right?" Tyler scratched his head, struggling for an answer. I smiled slightly and spoke for him. "Well, it's definitely a problem. Tyler has destroyed something belonging to his president." "President?" "Yes, the company Tyler is working for is a branch of my brother's company." My in-laws seemed unaware that their son's president was my brother. Indeed, at our wedding, influenced by my brother, we didn't tell Tyler's family that he was the president of the company. Before getting married, Tyler had worked at the main office in New York. At that time, my brother had introduced me to Tyler. And when we got married, my brother ordered Tyler to transfer to this branch. The reason for the transfer was actually Tyler's poor sales performance, but he was happy to live near his parents. However, he had never imagined targeting my family's property. By the way, Tyler's parents' house was old and cramped. They always complained about their own home. But now that they knew the property was actually owned by the president, my brother, Tyler couldn't just take over the land. Damn. I had no idea it was in the president's name. What's going to happen to me now? Will I have to compensate, or will I be fired? Hearing this, my mother-in-law suddenly looked anxious. Just because it's the president's house doesn't change the fact that he's family. Can't you talk it out and get it handed over? Don't be silly. That's impossible. I thought my mother-in-law was being incredibly naive. Tyler had been hired by my brother's company when he couldn't find a job elsewhere. He was already in a difficult position with my brother, and now he had made a serious mistake. Seeing that they wouldn't get the land they thought would be theirs, my in-laws began to show signs of panic. Tyler, what are you planning to do? You said we would live together because Kate's parents passed away before us, so we already sold the other house. Tyler, yelled at by his father-in-law, crouched down, holding his head. Then, my in-laws asked me, "Can't you do something about it?" Even though they asked, there was nothing I could do as I wasn't the owner. In this case, I really don't know what decision my brother will make. When I said that, my mother-in-law became furious. Are you still Tyler's wife? Isn't it part of being married to help your husband when he's in trouble? That's true, Mother. But he demolished the house without the owner's permission, so even if I wanted to support him, there's nothing I can do. Oh. What's wrong? It looks like you remembered something. I had forgotten something important. Wait. What happened to the heirlooms from my parents that were in the house? When I pressed them, my in-laws awkwardly looked away and said, "Oh. Those things?" The contractor said he couldn't demolish the house with them inside, so we disposed of them. Kate Baker, what? You disposed of all of them? Each item was filled with memories of my parents. That they had disposed of all of them was unforgivable to me. Tyler was still crouching down. My in-laws said they preferred I think of something to help Tyler rather than the heirlooms. However, I ignored the three of them and immediately left the house. As I was leaving, my in-laws shouted after me from behind. "Hey! Are you just going to leave Tyler and run away?" "Yes. Do you not care what happens to your own husband?" Ignoring their shouts, I hurried to my brother's place. On the way to New York, I called my brother. When I explained the situation over the phone, my brother sighed deeply. Tyler really is a handful, isn't he? He didn't even check who the owner was. I'm upset about the house, but what's unforgivable is that he disposed of our parents' belongings without permission. Well, let's discuss this when you get here. After hanging up, I felt uneasy about Tyler and my in-laws while heading to New York. Upon arriving at my brother's house, we started discussing our family home and our parents' belongings again. In fact, I vented my frustrations about Tyler and my in-laws to my brother. After listening quietly, my brother made a suggestion. Leave it to me for now. Kate, it might be hard for you to go home. But since you have work, why not stay with relatives nearby for a while? He then called a relative who lived locally and explained the situation. For a while, I would commute to my job from the relative's house. A few days later, my brother called Tyler to the headquarters. Tyler reluctantly made his way to the headquarters. At that time, I followed my brother's suggestion and stared at the smartphone screen. The screen showed the interior of the president's office at my brother's company. There, I could see Tyler awkwardly opening the door and entering. President. What did you want to see me about? You know already, right? I called you here to thank you for disposing of that house on my behalf. Tyler, surprised by my brother's unexpected words, widened his eyes. It seemed my brother was acting. He intended to put Tyler at ease before getting to the main issue. Huh? Are you not angry about me disposing of the family home without permission? What are you talking about? I'm not returning to the local area, so I was wondering what to do with the family home. The demolition costs are no small matter, right? It must have been expensive to demolish. Yes. Though Tyler responded, he seemed unsure about how much the demolition had cost. Likely, my in-laws had paid for it to build their own house on the site. Noticing this, my brother didn't mention the demolition costs further and changed the topic. By the way, Kate mentioned that all our parents' heirlooms were disposed of. Is that true? Yes. Well, there didn't seem to be any valuable items that were hard to dispose of. When Tyler answered, my brother furrowed his brow. That's strange. Dad had a hobby of collecting antiques. And I heard I gave Mom expensive jewelry for their golden wedding anniversary. Kate said Mom had kept it carefully. Wasn't that there either? Tyler looked around nervously as my brother pressed him. Indeed, the value of Dad's antiques and Mom's jewelry should have been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars if appraised. Even an amateur could see that dismissing them as junk was odd. As Tyler's face grew pale, my brother smiled slyly. I was considering covering the demolition costs, but if all the valuable items left in the house were disposed of. Actually, I had them appraised once, and they were worth $800,000 in total. $800,000? Tyler's eyes widened as much as they possibly could, and he stepped back. My brother, as if delivering the final blow, said, "Well, if you accidentally threw them away, it can't be helped, but it's strange to accidentally dispose of such valuable items. It seems more like there was malice, don't you think?" Tyler, panicked, knelt down on the spot. "I'm so sorry. All the heirlooms are with my parents. We will return everything, please, forgive us." So it was a lie after all, huh? Just as my brother said this, he started making a call from the office phone. The person on the other end seemed to be my father-in-law. My brother was asking for the returned heirlooms that Tyler had confessed to having. However, my father-in-law had sold some of the antiques to cover the demolition costs. Furthermore, my mother-in-law had taken a liking to the jewelry and refused to give it back. Hearing this, my brother looked at Tyler again. "As you heard, some of the heirlooms won't be coming back. What will you do now, Tyler?" Tyler was speechless, sweating on his forehead. Certainly, Tyler must have known that his father-in-law had used the money from the sold antiques to demolish the family home. Even if there was severance pay, it was unlikely that the stingy father-in-law would easily provide such a high amount. With a deep sigh, my brother then said to Tyler, "Now that it's come to this, you have no choice but to take responsibility for demolishing our family home without my permission as the owner. Additionally, you must compensate financially for the heirlooms that were sold." "What? You're saying I have to compensate?" "Yes. It was you who suggested building a new home on the family land to bring your parents there, so you must take full responsibility." Tyler slumped down completely, collapsing on the spot. But the reprimands from his brother didn't stop there. "And that was the punishment from me as your brother. Now, as the president, I will announce the sanctions against you, Tyler. Your sales performance was poor at the headquarters, which is why you were sent to the branch. However, it seems your performance did not improve there either." After saying this, my brother glanced at me through the screen. It seemed he intended to avenge me. "Well, let's put work aside. More importantly, it seems you have been causing your wife, Kate, a lot of distress at home. I was willing to value our relationship as relatives if you, even if not competent at work, at least took good care of your family." What do you mean?" "Tyler. You should understand, having worked at our company for so many years, that our employees are like family. However, I cannot continue to see you as family when you've been causing my sister such distress. Do you understand what I'm getting at?" My brother glared sharply at Tyler. Then, Tyler, sweating profusely, timidly asked his brother, "Are you saying I'm fired?" "Exactly." My brother made a thumbs-up gesture close to Tyler's face as he confirmed it. However, Tyler did not remain silent. "With all due respect, President, I think it's inappropriate to mix work and personal issues. And where is the evidence that I made Kate suffer? Should I have Kate tell you herself?" Tyler, noticing my laughter, stared intently at the screen showing me. "Kate. Is this a video call on a messaging app?" Have you been eavesdropping all along? No, it's not that Kate has been eavesdropping. I asked her to listen in silently. Isn't that the same thing? Tyler, his face turning red, trembled with clenched fists. Despite his own inappropriate actions, he was the one getting angry. Listening to the conversation, I felt increasingly pathetic about Tyler. Tyler. Why did you lie about throwing away the heirlooms and shrug off making me suffer? I can't trust you anymore. Hearing my tearful voice, my brother said to Tyler. See, her distress is proof enough. Also, I received a letter from our father before he passed away. My brother then took out an envelope and read the letter inside. According to the letter, my father had informed my in-laws about my mother's chronic illness, yet my mother-in-law constantly made spiteful remarks to her. The worsening of my mother's illness was also due to the accumulated stress. It seemed that my father was also upset with my in-laws. Perhaps my father disliked Tyler because he never admonished his parents as their son. Tyler. I hope you understand now. I'm concerned for Kate's well-being if we continue to associate with you and your parents. I know we shouldn't mix personal and professional issues, but for your own good, I need you to resign from the company as well. Tyler looked grim as he heard this. I spoke to him through the screen. I've also come to realize that we can't go on together. I have a divorce form ready here, so please sign it when you come back. Tyler glanced sideways at me. His eyes seemed tearful as he murmured to me. Was it so wrong to care about my parents? Tyler, it's not that caring for your parents is wrong. You just couldn't detach yourself from parents who always pampered you. If you truly cared about your family, you wouldn't have imposed your parents on your wife like this. Tyler might have just been spoiled. Realizing this, he fell silent without any retort. A few days later, he signed the divorce papers, and we were officially divorced. I didn't demand compensation from Tyler, but instead, I insisted that his parents return the heirlooms and compensate for the ones they had sold. In fact, among the antiques that were sold, there was one particularly valuable item, which my father-in-law unknowingly sold at a low price. Consequently, my ex-in-laws ended up losing their home and much of their retirement savings due to the reimbursement for the antiques. After the divorce, I cut off all contact with Tyler and his parents. However, I heard about Tyler's current situation through someone else. Since being fired, he has struggled to find another job. Having no particular skills, his employment options were limited. My ex-in-laws had sold their home, so they were living in Tyler's apartment. Originally, the rent for that apartment was manageable only with my earnings. For a while, they managed to get by on what little was left of my ex-father-in-law's retirement fund, but eventually, they began to fall behind on rent. That's when the landlord contacted me, and I learned about their current situation. When asked about the rent, it was clear I wasn't going to pay it for them. Sometime later, Tyler messaged me, saying they had been evicted from the apartment because they couldn't see how to pay the rent. We have nowhere to go. Could you please consider getting back together with me and taking care of my parents? I regretted not blocking his number when I inadvertently marked the message as read. Deciding I no longer wanted any interaction, I blocked all his contacts. I now live in a place unknown to Tyler or his parents, ensuring we won't meet again. I quit my job and moved to New York. My brother sold the plot where our family home once stood and bought a 3-room apartment in New York with the money, asking me to live with him. While I planned to look for a job in New York, he asked me to help with his business. I feel bad always being helped by you, brother. No, it's fine. Dad asked me to take care of you if anything happened to him and Mom. I was surprised that my father had been so concerned about my future. I didn't know that. Well, I'll make sure to contribute to the company and be of help to you from now on. That's reassuring to hear. After all, you're my sister. Growing up, I always admired and followed my brother, striving to be like him. He rescued me from this crisis. Maybe we siblings weren't lucky in marriage. However, from now on, we plan to grow the business together as a team. That's our path forward as siblings.
I'm Anna, and this story isn't just mine. It's about the life I shared with Michael, my husband, and how everything we built together slowly unraveled. We met in college, two dreamers with ambitions as high as the stars. Michael was the kind of guy who could light up a room with his laugh, simple yet charming, always with a kind word for everyone. We fell in love, graduated, and, as luck would have it, started our careers at the same company. Life was good, simple, and blissfully happy. Our evenings were the highlight of my days. We'd come home, cook together, and share stories about our work. Michael was a good listener, always interested in my day, my ideas. He was supportive, proud of our equal standing at work, our shared ambitions. "Anna, you're amazing at what you do," he'd say with a smile. "I love that we're in this together." But then everything changed when Michael got promoted. It was a significant achievement, and initially, I was overjoyed. But with the promotion came a change I hadn't anticipated. Michael started to care more about appearances, about status. He wasn't the same man I'd fallen in love with. Slowly, his criticism began. First, it was subtle, a comment here or there. "Why do we always eat the same meals? We can afford better now," he'd remark, pushing his plate away. I tried to adapt to please him, but nothing seemed good enough. He began to critique my clothing, my shopping choices, even how I decorated our home. "Why do you always buy the cheapest brands? We're not college students anymore, Anna," he'd say, his voice laced with annoyance. I felt a growing distance between us, a chasm that I didn't know how to bridge. The man I loved, who once found joy in our simple life, was now obsessed with wealth and status. One evening, after I returned from grocery shopping with more budget-friendly items, Michael's frustration boiled over. "Anna, this isn't acceptable. You're still dressing and shopping like we're on a tight budget." "You don't match my status," he said coldly, his words cutting through me like a knife. His words lingered in the air, marking the end of our simple, happy days. That was the moment I realized how much he had changed, how much our life had diverged from the path we once walked together. It was the beginning of the end, the start of a journey I never expected to take. As days turned into weeks, the strain in our relationship only deepened. Michael's constant critiques about how I didn't match his status weighed heavily on me. I missed the man he used to be, the one who found joy in our simple life together. But as his obsession with wealth and appearances grew, our connection continued to fade. In the midst of this growing distance, life threw us a curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a mix of emotions, joy, fear, and a glimmer of hope that this might bring us back together. Mikhail's reaction to the pregnancy was surprisingly warm. His face, which had been filled with dissatisfaction for so long, lit up when I told him. "Really? We're going to have a baby!" he exclaimed, his voice filled with an excitement I hadn't heard in ages. For the first time in months, I saw a spark of the old Michael. During my pregnancy, he was attentive and caring, often checking in on me and ensuring I was comfortable. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a brief return to the days when we were a team. When our son David was born, Michael's joy was palpable. Holding David for the first time, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "He's perfect, Anna. We made this beautiful boy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The early days with David were a blur of sleepless nights and new routines, but they were also filled with moments of tenderness and joy. Michael, despite his busy schedule, tried to be there for David's first milestones. Watching him with our son, I saw glimpses of the man I had fallen in love with. With David's arrival, our relationship found a temporary peace. The arguments and criticism subsided, replaced by shared moments of wonder over our son. It was as if David's presence healed some of the fractures in our marriage. I cherished this period, hoping it would last. that maybe this was the turning point we needed. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a brief respite, a calm before another storm. For now, though, I held on to the hope that our family could find its way back to the happiness we once knew. Life with a newborn was a whirlwind, and for a while, it seemed to bridge the gap between Michael and me. But as David grew and the novelty of new fatherhood faded for Michael, the old patterns began to resurface. Michael's work consumed him more than ever, and when he was home, his attention was more focused on showing off David than actually bonding with him. He would buy our son the most expensive toys and clothes, things a toddler would never appreciate. One evening, I found Michael online browsing through a list of elite preschools. He didn't even look up as I entered the room. "Anna, I'm thinking of enrolling David in St. James Academy. It's the best in the city," he said, not asking but telling. I sat beside him, trying to keep my voice calm. "Michael, he's just 2. Do we really need to send him to such an expensive school?" He finally looked at me, his expression one of disbelief. "Of course we do. He's my son. He deserves the best. But he needs time to be a kid, Michael. Love and attention, not just the most expensive things," I argued, feeling a familiar frustration. Michael shook his head, dismissing my concerns. "You don't understand, Anna. It's about giving him opportunities I never had. This was our new normal. Conversations turned into debates and debates into arguments. It felt like we were speaking different languages. I longed for the days when our dreams and values aligned. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it became physical. Michael often returned late from work, long after David and I had dinner. One night, when he came home at an ungodly hour, I couldn't hold back my frustration. "Michael, it's past midnight. You missed dinner again. David asked about you," I said, my voice laced with exhaustion. He shrugged off his coat, weary yet indifferent. "I'm the head of the department now, Anna. These late nights are just part of the job. But what about us, Michael? What about your family?" I pleaded, hoping to reach some part of the man I married. He paused, his face a mix of fatigue and annoyance. "I'm doing all this for our family, Anna. You and David are living comfortably because of my hard work." As I lay in bed that night, listening to the faint clicks of his laptop from the other room, I realized that our little family was drifting apart. My husband, once my partner in every aspect of life, was now a stranger living under the same roof, connected only by a shared past and a son who deserved better than this growing void between his parents. It was during one of those long, silent evenings that I made a decision. I needed to go back to work, to find a piece of the woman I used to be before the distance with Michael grew too vast. The perfect opportunity came when a position opened up at my old company, the same place where Michael and I had started our journey together. Feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, I decided to broach the subject with Michael. "Michael, I've been thinking of going back to work. There's an opening in my old department," I said, hoping for his support. His reaction was immediate and strong. "Go back to work? Why? Why would you need to do that? I'm making more than enough for both of us," he replied, barely looking up from his laptop. I tried to explain. "It's not about the money, Michael. It's about me, about feeling like I'm contributing, being part of a team again." Michael finally looked at me, his expression one of disapproval. "You can contribute by taking care of David and the house. That's your team now." I couldn't hide my frustration. "But I need more than that. I want to use my skills, feel professional achievement again. Besides, it's good for David to see both his parents working." Michael stood up, his voice rising. "You going back to work, especially at my company, is not a good idea. What will people think? That I can't provide for my family?" I was taken aback by his attitude. "So this is about your image, your status?" He ignored my question and continued, "Look at yourself. Anna, you've changed. You've let yourself go since having David." His words were like a slap in the face. I felt my cheeks burning with a mix of anger and hurt. "What do you mean I've let myself go?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You know what I mean? You've gained weight. You hardly take care of yourself. It's not a good look, especially not for the wife of a department head," he said, his tone cold and detached. I was speechless, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who once loved me for who I was now stood there, criticizing my appearance, my worth. And frankly, he added, his words cutting deeper, "I would be embarrassed to have you working at the company looking like this. I will be ashamed at work for such an ugly wife." I stood there frozen as he walked out of the room, his words echoing in my mind, a cruel reminder of how far we had drifted apart. That night, I lay awake, Michael's words replaying over and over. It was clear now. The man I married, the man I loved, was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. The days following Michael's harsh critique were some of the loneliest I had ever experienced. His words had cut deep, leaving me to question not just our relationship, but my self-worth. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected incident occurred that changed everything. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a delivery man holding a large, extravagant bouquet of flowers. Confused, I accepted the bouquet and the accompanying card, thinking maybe Mikhail was attempting an awkward apology. But as I opened the card, my heart sank. The words were like a punch to the gut. "To the most beautiful and perfect woman in the world, with the most charming youth and slender waist which can be embraced with two hands," the words mocked me, a stark contrast to what Michael had said just days before. I felt a mix of anger and humiliation wash over me. This wasn't for me. It couldn't be. It was then I noticed the mistake in the address. The bouquet was meant for someone else. As I stood there trying to process this, my phone rang. It was Michael's new secretary, a young girl who had just started working for him. "Mrs. Smith, I'm so sorry. I think I've made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice anxious. "What mistake?" I asked, though I already had an idea. "The flowers. They were meant for someone else. I'm so sorry I sent them to the wrong address," she admitted, sounding flustered. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "Who were they meant for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know her name. I'm just asked to send flowers and gifts sometimes. Please don't tell Mr. Smith," she pleaded. After we hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room, the unfaithful bouquet mocking me from the table. The realization of Michael's betrayal hit me hard. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Without a second thought, I packed a bag for myself and David. I couldn't stay in that house a moment longer, surrounded by the life I thought we had, which now felt like a lie. I left a note for Michael on the kitchen counter and took David to my sister's place. That evening, as I sat in my sister's living room lost in thought, Michael showed up unexpectedly. He looked frantic, a stark contrast to his usual composed self. "Anna, why did you leave? Why did you take David?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of concern and anger. I confronted him directly. "Why, maybe because of the bouquet sent to your mistress, mistakenly delivered to your wife," I said, my voice steady but filled with hurt. Michael's face fell. That was a misunderstanding. The secretary, she made a mistake. I swear there's nothing going on," he stammered. I looked at him, trying to find a hint of the truth in his eyes, but all I saw was desperation. "A mistake? Is that your best explanation?" I asked, my voice trembling. Before he could respond, I pulled out a packet of photos and laid them on the table. "Then how do you explain these, Michael?" I demanded. His eyes widened as he looked at the photos of him with a young woman, clearly more than just colleagues. Where did you get these?" he stammered. "I hired a private detective. He's been very thorough. Did you know she's the wife of your business partner? I asked, watching as the color drained from his face. You can't let these get out. It'll ruin everything, he pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. I felt a bitter laugh escape me. Ruin everything. What about us, Michael? What about our family? I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. He reached out, but I pulled away. Anna, please, I'm begging you. Forgive me. I can fix this, he pleaded, desperation evident in his eyes. But it was too late for apologies, too late for forgiveness. Forgive you after you've lied and cheated. I can't, Michael. I won't. I'm filing for divorce, and these photos, they'll ensure I get what David and I deserve, I said, my voice firm. Michael looked defeated, his shoulders slumping as the reality of the situation hit him. Anna, please, he begged, but I had made up my mind. No, Michael, you've made your choice. Now I'm making mine, I said, my voice unwavering. As he left, I knew that this was the end of our marriage. The evidence in my hands was more than just proof of his infidelity. It was the key to a new beginning for me and David. The road ahead would be hard, but I was determined to rebuild our lives free from lies and betrayal. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and tough decisions. I had initiated the divorce proceedings armed with the evidence of Michael's infidelity. Despite the turmoil, there was a sense of determination within me. I was fighting not just for my own dignity, but for a better future for David. One afternoon, I met with my lawyer to discuss the details of the divorce. We have a strong case, Anna. The evidence you provided is more than enough to ensure a favorable outcome for you and David, she said, her voice confident. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. I just want this to be over. I want to ensure that David is taken care of, I said. My lawyer assured me, we'll make sure of that. You'll have custody, and with Michael's position, child support won't be an issue. As the days passed, the reality of my new life began to set in. I was going to be a single mother, a role I never anticipated, but I also felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was making decisions, standing up for myself and my son. The final hearing was a tense affair. Michael and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, the air thick with unspoken words. When the judge granted the divorce, citing Michael's infidelity, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was officially free from a marriage that had become a source of pain and betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Michael approached me. Anna, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this, he said, his voice laced with defeat. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now a stranger. It didn't have to be this way, Michael, but you made your choices, I said. He nodded, a look of resignation on his face. I just hope one day you can forgive me, for David's sake. I took a deep breath. I'll always do what's best for David, but as for us, there's nothing left to say. Walking away from the courthouse, I felt a sense of closure. The divorce was not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of a new chapter. I had stood up for myself, fought for what was right, and in the end, I had come out stronger. The finalization of the divorce marked the start of a new chapter in my life. It was a time of rebuilding, not just for me, but for David as well. We had both been through so much, and now it was time to look forward to a future that was ours to shape. One sunny afternoon, as David played in my sister's backyard, I sat with her on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand. You know, I never thought I'd be here starting over like this, I said, watching David chase butterflies. My sister, always my rock, smiled at me. But you're not just starting over, Anna. You're starting fresh. There's a difference. You're stronger now, more aware of what you want and don't want. I nodded, feeling the truth in her words. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's all so overwhelming at times. She reached over, squeezing my hand. It's going to be okay. You've got this, and you've got us. Always. I smiled, grateful for her support. Thanks, I don't know what I'd do without you. As the days turned into weeks, I began to find my footing again. I returned to work, where I was greeted with warmth and understanding. It felt good to be back, to be productive, and to engage with colleagues who respected and valued me. David, too, was adjusting. He missed his father, but we made sure he had regular visits. I wanted to ensure that, despite everything, he had a relationship with Michael. After all, whatever had happened between Michael and me, he was still David's dad. One evening, as I tucked David into bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, are you happy?" he asked, his voice soft. I kissed his forehead, feeling a surge of love for my little boy. "Yes, David, I am, and I want you to always be happy too." He smiled a sleepy, content smile. "I am, Mommy. I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything," I whispered, turning off his light. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey I had been on. I thought about the future, uncertain but promising. I had dreams to chase, a career to build, and a beautiful son to raise. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that this wasn't just a new beginning. It was a chance to write my own story on my own terms. And with that thought, I welcomed the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, ready to embrace them with an open heart and a newfound strength.
I stared at my phone in disbelief, the words on the screen blurring as my vision clouded with tears. It was a simple text message, but one that shattered the foundation of my life with 3 brutal words: "I want a divorce." Trent's message continued, each sentence like a dagger to my heart. "I've been having an affair with Lila, and I'm leaving you to be with her. It's over between us." My hands trembled as I clutched the phone, a maelstrom of emotions raging within me. Anger, betrayal, and devastation fought for dominance, leaving me breathless and nauseous. Trent's timing couldn't have been worse. He sent this bombshell while I was at the grocery store, surrounded by the mundane sights and sounds of everyday life. In that instant, my world crumbled around me, and I found myself lost in a surreal nightmare. As I stepped outside, the crisp evening air did little to calm the storm brewing inside me. My phone buzzed again, and I flinched, bracing myself for another blow. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," Trent's message read. "I want full custody of the kids, and I'm going to fight for the house." Fury ignited within me, burning away the initial shock and pain. How dare he think he could just discard me and our family like yesterday's trash? After everything we'd been through together, all the sacrifices I'd made for him and our children, this was how he repaid me? "You lying, cheating bastard!" I shouted, drawing bewildered stares from passers-by. I didn't care. The dam had burst, and years of bottled emotions came pouring out. My phone rang, and Trent's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my voice trembling with rage. "How could you do this to us?" "Cass, please understand," Trent began, his tone maddeningly calm. "I've fallen in love with Lila, and she makes me happy in a way you haven't for years." "Happy?" I spat. "You selfish prick. What about the vows we made? What about our children?" "I'm sorry, but it's over," he said flatly. "I'll be coming by to collect my things tomorrow." The line went dead, leaving me standing in the parking lot, shaking with fury and disbelief. Tears streamed down my face, but I refused to let them diminish the fire raging within me. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The meek, accommodating Cassidy, who had devoted herself to her family, was gone, replaced by a woman who would fight tooth and nail for what was rightfully hers. No longer would I be a doormat for Trent's ego and indiscretions. If he thought he could just walk away and start a new life, leaving me and the kids to fend for ourselves, he was sorely mistaken. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was war, and I would show no mercy. With renewed determination, I marched back to my car, my mind already plotting my next moves. Trent wanted a battle? He was going to get one. And by the time I was done with him, he'd regret the day he ever betrayed me. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, a reminder of the emotional turmoil I'd endured the night before. But the ache in my heart was far worse than any physical pain. I forced myself out of bed, determined to confront the harsh realities of my new existence. First on the agenda, gathering evidence of Trent's betrayal. I rifled through his dresser drawers, my hands shaking as I uncovered damning proof, hotel receipts, charges for expensive jewelry, and worse, dozens of text messages exchanged with his little tramp Lila. "You're the only one for me, baby," one message read. "I can't wait to start our life together." Bile rose in my throat as I scanned through their sickening exchanges, each one more explicit than the last. How could the man I'd loved and trusted for over 15 years be capable of such depravity? The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my daze. I shoved the evidence back into the drawer and hurried downstairs, steeling myself for the confrontation. Trent stood in the foyer, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His gaze was cold, devoid of the warmth and affection I'd once cherished. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I told you, I'm here to collect my things," he said coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse me—" "Like hell I will," I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "You think you can just waltz in and out of our lives like nothing happened?" Trent's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Cass. We're done, and it's time for both of us to move on." "Move on?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You've got some nerve, you cheating piece of—" "Watch your mouth," he snapped. "And don't act so high and mighty. You know things haven't been right between us for years." His words stung, but I refused to let him see how deeply they cut. "That's no excuse for what you've done," I hissed. "You betrayed me, betrayed our family, all for some young floozy." Trent's face flushed with anger. "Don't you dare talk about Lila that way. She's 10 times the woman you'll ever be." In that moment, something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, connecting with Trent's cheek in a resounding slap. He recoiled, clutching his face in shock. "You crazy bitch! Get out!" I screamed, shoving him toward the door. "Get out of my house and don't ever come back." Trent glared at me, his eyes burning with hatred. Without another word, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs. Amid the pain and heartbreak, a new emotion took root, a burning desire for revenge. Trent thought he could discard me like yesterday's garbage? Well, he was gravely mistaken. I would make him pay for every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of anguish he'd put me through. As I regained my composure, a plan began to form. I couldn't win by playing fair. Not against a man as ruthless and self-serving as Trent. No, I would have to fight fire with fire, and I knew just the person who could help me do it. Reaching for my phone, I dialed the number of my best friend, Jenna. If anyone could help me bring Trent to his knees, it was her. "Jenna," I said, my voice thick with determination. "I need your help. It's time to make that bastard pay." Jenna arrived at my doorstep within the hour, her expression a mix of concern and fury. "That lying snake," she seethed as she pulled me into a tight embrace. "I can't believe he did this to you." I fought back tears, determined not to let Trent's betrayal break me. "Believe it," I said bitterly. "The proof is right upstairs." Together we rifled through the damning evidence I'd uncovered, the hotel receipts, the jewelry charges, the sordid text exchanges. With each new revelation, Jenna's outrage grew. "We have to make him pay," she declared, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "He can't be allowed to get away with this." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "Trent thinks he can just walk away and start a new life with that little tramp, but he's got another thing coming." Jenna squeezed my hand, offering a supportive smile. "Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll take that bastard down together." Over the next few days, Jenna became my rock, my confidant, and my co-conspirator. We pored over every detail of Trent's deception, looking for any angle we could exploit. It didn't take long to uncover his underhanded financial maneuvers, secret accounts, offshore holdings, all designed to leave me penniless while he rode off into the sunset with his new plaything. "That deceitful son of a bitch," Jenna snarled as we pieced together the paper trail. "He's been planning this for months, maybe years." "Well, his little scheme ends now," I said, my voice steely with determination. "I won't let him take everything I've worked for." With Jenna's help, I began gathering ammunition, records, bank statements, anything that could be used as evidence against Trent. We would hit him where it hurt. His bank account, and his precious reputation. As the days passed, I could feel a remarkable shift taking place within me. The meek, downtrodden woman I'd been was fading away, replaced by a fierce, unstoppable force driven by a thirst for justice. Gone were the self-doubts and insecurities that had plagued me for so long. In their place was a newfound confidence, a belief in my own strength and resilience. I started taking better care of myself, hitting the gym and revamping my wardrobe. With each passing day, I felt more powerful, more in control of my destiny. Jenna noticed the change, too. "Look at you," she remarked one afternoon, a proud grin spreading across her face. "You're like a phoenix rising from the ashes." I flashed her a sly smile. "You ain't seen nothing yet. By the time I'm done with Trent, he'll be the one reduced to ashes." Trent had made the mistake of underestimating me, of thinking I would simply roll over and accept his betrayal. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. As I pored over the mounting evidence, plotting my next move, a delicious sense of anticipation washed over me. The game was afoot, and I was playing for keeps. Trent wanted a war. He was going to get one, and by the time the smoke cleared, he would rue the day he ever crossed Cassidy Monroe. A week had passed since Trent's abrupt departure, and I was ready to strike. Jenna and I had gathered enough evidence to bury him 10 times over, but I wanted the satisfaction of seeing the fear in his eyes when he realized his carefully laid plans were unraveling. I arranged for us to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city where we used to love grabbing Sunday brunch. The sight of it twisted my gut, but I refused to let Trent take that from me, too. He arrived exactly at noon, his expression a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled arrogance. "Cass," he said coolly as he slid into the booth across from me. "This is a surprise." I met his gaze, my own eyes steely with resolve. "Cut the crap, Trent. You know exactly why I asked you here." His bravado faltered for just a moment before the smug mask slipped back into place. "If this is about the divorce, I thought I made myself clear. This is about a lot more than that," I interrupted, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. "Why don't you take a look inside?" Trent eyed the envelope warily, but his curiosity got the better of him. With a dismissive shrug, he tore it open and began rifling through the contents, bank statements, investment records, all documenting the illicit financial web he'd spun. His face paled as the realization set in. "Where did you get these?" he hissed, his eyes darting around the cafe. "That's not important," I said coolly. "What matters is that I know everything. The secret accounts, the offshore holdings, all of it." Trent's hands trembled with barely contained rage. "You conniving little—" "I'd watch my tone if I were you," I warned, reveling in his discomfort, "unless you want all of this finding its way into the hands of the IRS and your precious Lila." His eyes widened at the mention of her name. "You wouldn't dare." A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. "Try me." For several tense moments we stared each other down, the air thick with animosity and unspoken threats. Finally, Trent broke the silence. "What do you want?" he growled, his arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of his exposure. "What do I want?" I echoed, leaning back in my seat. "I want you to suffer. I want you to experience the same fear, the same humiliation, the same utter despair that you've put me through." His eyes narrowed. "You're delusional if you think—" "I'm not finished," I snapped, cutting him off. "I want full custody of the kids, and I want the house. Every last dime you've stashed away is going into a trust for them, one you'll never be able to touch." Trent's face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me." "I can and I will," I said, rising from my seat. "Consider this your one and only warning, Trent. Play ball, or I'll make sure you lose everything. Your money, your career, your precious Lila. The choice is yours." With that, I turned on my heel and strode out of the cafe, leaving Trent to stew in the ruins of his shattered plans. A delicious sense of satisfaction washed over me. The game was on, and for once I was in control. As I stepped into the sunlight, Jenna fell into stride beside me, a proud grin on her face. "You were amazing in there," she gushed. "Did you see the look on his face?" I allowed myself a small, victorious smile. "Just the first of many," I assured her. "Trent hasn't seen anything yet." The battle lines had been drawn, and I was just getting started. Trent thought he could outsmart me, could discard me and ride off into the sunset with his little plaything. Well, he was about to learn a very painful lesson. You never underestimate a woman scorned. In the days following my confrontation with Trent, a strange sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control of my life, no longer a helpless victim, but a woman taking back her power. Trent had gone into hiding, no doubt licking his wounds and plotting his next move. But I wasn't worried. The ball was in my court now, and I had no intention of playing by his rules. It was during this period of quiet that an unexpected ally emerged. Lila herself. The cheery ring of my doorbell one afternoon heralded her arrival, and I must admit I was taken aback by her presence on my doorstep. "Lila," I said, fighting to keep my voice even. "What a surprise." She offered me a hesitant smile, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I know this is awkward, but I was hoping we could talk." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her in. Whatever her game, I was curious to see it play out. We settled in the living room, an uneasy silence stretching between us. Finally, Lila spoke up. I saw Trent the other day," she began, her voice small. He was a mess." I arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Do tell." Lila Worryline creased her brow. "He kept ranting about you, about some kind of evidence you had. Cass, what's going on?" For a moment, I debated how much to reveal, but something in Lila's wide, guileless eyes told me she was just as much a victim of Trent's lies as I was. And so I told her everything, the affair, the financial deception, my plans for vengeance. As the sordid tale tumbled out, I watched Lila's expression shift from confusion, outrage. "That lying son of a bitch," she spat when I'd finished, her hands clenched into tight fists. "He told me. He said he was going to divorce you, that we could finally be together without any secrets." I couldn't help but bark out a bitter laugh. Looks like Trent was playing us both for fools. Tears glistened in Lila's eyes, but they were born of anger rather than sorrow. "What are you going to do?" A slow, vindictive smile spread across my face. "I'm going to burn his entire world to the ground, and I could use a partner in crime." Lila's eyes widened, but she didn't recoil from the implied offer. If anything, her gaze grew more determined. "I'm in," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "That bastard needs to pay for what he did to us." And just like that, an unlikely alliance was forged. Two women, once pitted against each other, now united in their quest to take down the man who had betrayed them both. Over the next few days, Lila and I pored over every shred of evidence, every damning document, crafting a meticulous plan to completely dismantle Trent's life. We would strike at his finances, his reputation, his very way of life. No stone would be left unturned. Revenge took on an entirely new meaning as Lila and I worked in tandem. What I lacked in knowledge of Trent's personal life, she more than made up for, and what she couldn't provide in terms of resources, I gladly supplied. With each passing day, our bond grew stronger, fortified by our shared trauma and an unshakable thirst for justice. We were an unstoppable force, and Trent would soon feel the full brunt of our wrath. As we put the finishing touches on our scheme, Lila turned to me, her eyes blazing with determination. "You ready to make that bastard pay?" she asked, her voice laced with anticipation. I flashed her a wolfish grin. "More than ready. Let's light this candle." Trent's downfall was all but assured. He thought he could play us, could shatter our lives without consequence. Well, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The game was afoot, and we were playing for keeps. The day of reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. Lila and I had meticulously plotted every move, gathered every shred of evidence, and laid the trap with exquisite precision. All that was left was to spring it, and watch as Trent's world came crashing down around him. It began with a series of anonymous tips to the IRS, detailing the intricate web of offshore accounts and shady financial dealings we'd uncovered. Within days, the auditors were swarming, and Trent's once immaculate records were being picked apart. Next, we leaked the incriminating text messages and hotel receipts to the local media, along with photos and videos that left no doubt as to the tawdry nature of Trent's affair. His sleazy exploits were plastered across every newspaper and news channel, his indiscretions laid bare for the world to see. I'll never forget the look on his face when he stormed through my front door that fateful morning, his eyes wild with panic and rage. "You crazy bitch," he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "What have you done?" I rose from the couch, unfazed by his outburst. Me? I haven't done anything, Trent. I'm just an innocent party in all of this. His gaze shifted to Lila, who stood beside me, her arms folded across her chest in defiant solidarity. You, he snarled, rounding on her. You did this, didn't you? You vindictive little. Watch your mouth, I warned, stepping between them. Your quarrel is with me, not her. Trent's face contorted in an ugly sneer. This isn't over, Cass. Not by a long shot. You think you've won, but I'm going to bury you. I'll take the kids, the house, everything. I wouldn't be so sure about that. The new voice belonged to my lawyer, Mr. Davidson, who strode into the room with a grim expression. Mr. Davidson? Trent sputtered, his bravado faltering. What's going on here? The lawyer fixed him with a withering stare. What's going on, Mr. Monroe, is that your underhanded financial dealings have been brought to light. The IRS is already preparing charges of tax evasion and fraud, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Trent's face drained of color. But my money is being seized as we speak, Mr. Davidson continued, relentless, along with your assets, your property, and quite possibly your freedom. You can't do this, Trent cried, panic lending a shrill edge to his voice. I'll fight this, I swear to God. Mr. Davidson shook his head, his lips curling into a thin, humorless smile. I'd save my energy if I were you, Mr. Monroe. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and it's only a matter of time before the other shoes drop. As if on cue, Trent's phone began ringing incessantly, no doubt a barrage of calls from his frantic colleagues and erstwhile lovers. With shaking hands, he pulled it from his pocket, his eyes widening in horror as he scanned the incoming messages. No, this can't be happening. But it was. His sordid affairs, his financial crimes, every last skeleton he'd tried so desperately to keep buried, was being violently exhumed and laid bare for all to see. In that moment, I allowed myself a fleeting sense of triumph. We had well and truly dismantled Trent's life, bringing him to his knees just as he had done to me. As the reality of his downfall set in, Trent turned to me, his eyes burning with impotent fury. You won't get away with this, he spat, his words laced with venom. I'll make you pay if it's the last thing I do. I met his gaze, unflinching. I'm counting on it. With a dismissive flick of my hand, I turned away, signaling the end of our interaction. Trent had been utterly destroyed, both personally and professionally, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The battle was won, and I had emerged victorious, lean, resolute, and unbowed by his attempts to break me. As Trent was led away, Mr. Davidson turned to me, a grudging respect in his eyes. Well played, Mrs. Monroe, he murmured. Well played indeed. Lila's hand found mine, giving it a gentle squeeze as we watched the shattered husk of a man disappear. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I was ready to face it head-on. Trent's betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the end it had gifted me with something far more precious, the strength to fight for myself and my future. As I looked toward the dawn of new beginnings, one thought echoed through my mind. Let the karma begin. The weeks following Trent's downfall were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers, accountants, and investigators swarmed around me, dismantling the tangled web of deceit he'd so carefully constructed. With each passing day, new revelations of his misdeeds came to light, and the full extent of his betrayal became glaringly apparent. Through it all, I remained stoic and resolute, my thirst for vengeance tempered by a growing sense of relief. The nightmare was finally over, and I could begin to rebuild my life on my own terms. Lila proved to be an invaluable ally during this turbulent time. We grew closer than I ever could have imagined, bound by our shared trauma and the knowledge that we had taken down a true monster together. You're one tough cookie, Cass, she remarked one evening as we shared a glass of celebratory wine. I don't know how you managed to keep it together through all of this. I allowed myself a rueful smile. Believe me, there were times when I wanted to curl up and just disappear, but then I'd remember what that bastard put us through, and it would harden my resolve all over again. Lila nodded, her expression somber. He'll get what's coming to him. The courts, the law, they'll make sure of that. I hope so, I murmured, swirling the rich liquid in my glass. But part of me wants more than just a court ruling or a prison sentence. Lila arched an eyebrow, intrigued. What did you have in mind? A slow, predatory smile spread across my face. A little taste of his own medicine. The opportunity to exact my ultimate revenge came sooner than expected. One crisp autumn evening, a familiar figure appeared on my doorstep, a haggard, broken shell of the man who had once sworn to love and cherish me. "Cass," Trent rasped, his eyes sunken and haunted. "We need to talk." I eyed him warily, taking in his disheveled appearance and the stench of cheap whiskey that clung to him. "Talk," I echoed, unable to keep the disdain from my voice. "About what exactly?" "Your complete and utter disgrace." He flinched as if I'd struck him, but soldiered on. "Please, Cass, I'm begging you. Give me a chance to explain, to make things right." Despite my better judgment, I allowed him to enter, if only to witness the full extent of his pathetic groveling. Trent sank into the nearest chair, his hands trembling as he struggled to collect his thoughts. "I've lost everything," he croaked, his voice thick with emotion. "My job, my money, my reputation, all of it gone, because of my own stupidity and arrogance." I said nothing, watching him impassively as he slowly unraveled. "And Lila," a bitter laugh escaped his cracked lips, "she took off the moment the truth came out, took whatever she could grab and vanished, just like that." "Did you expect anything less?" I asked coolly. "She was using you, just like you used me." Trent's head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I've made so many mistakes, Cass. Hurt so many people, especially you. He lifted his head, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry for everything. If I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat." For an endless moment, I simply stared at the broken husk of a man before me, weighing his words and pleas for absolution. Finally, I spoke. "Did you really think some half-baked apology would undo the years of pain and anguish you put me through?" I asked, my voice hard as steel. "The lies, the betrayal, the disrespect. Did you honestly believe a few crocodile tears would absolve you of all that?" Trent opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Save your breath," I spat. "You made your choices, Trent, and now you're living with the consequences. You thought you could just toss me aside like garbage for some younger piece of ass, leave me with nothing while you rode off into the sunset?" I rose from my seat, looming over his shriveled form with a cold, merciless glare. "Well, you were wrong, dead wrong, and now you'll spend every day haunted by that mistake, tormented by the knowledge that you threw away the best thing you ever had on a whim." Trent's head fell once more, his body shuddering with ragged sobs. I felt no pity, no sympathy, only the grim satisfaction of a debt finally paid in full. "Get out," I said, my voice laced with finality. "And don't ever show your face here again." As Trent dragged himself from the house, a broken and defeated man, I turned to find Lila watching from the nearby doorway, her eyes shining with pride. "Well done, Cass," she murmured. "Well done." In that moment, I knew my long journey had finally reached its end. The scales had been balanced, karma restored, and I had emerged victorious. It was, in every sense of the word, a new beginning. The weeks following Trent's pathetic attempt at reconciliation were a whirlwind of activity. With the legal matters finally resolved and my financial security assured, I found myself facing an unfamiliar sensation: freedom. For the first time in years, I was truly unshackled from the weight of Trent's betrayal and manipulation. The future stretched out before me, vast and full of possibility. Lila remained a constant presence during this period of transition, her unwavering support and friendship proving invaluable as I navigated the uncharted waters of my new life. "You've come so far, Cass," she remarked one sunny afternoon as we strolled through the park near my home. "Just look at you. You're practically glowing." I couldn't help but smile at her observation. It was true, the haunted, hollow-eyed woman I'd been in the depths of my turmoil seemed like a distant memory. "I owe it all to you, you know," I said, giving her hand an affectionate squeeze. "If it wasn't for your help, your courage, I might never have found the strength to take Trent down." Lila waved off the praise with a dismissive gesture. "Don't sell yourself short. The fire was always there. I just helped fan the flames a little." Her words rang true. The past year had been a crucible, a trial by fire that had forged me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. The insecurities and self-doubts that had once held me back were gone, replaced by an unshakable sense of confidence and self-worth. As we continued our stroll, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. From the depths of despair and betrayal to a life brimming with promise and possibility, It was almost too much to comprehend. "So, what's next for the indomitable Cassidy Monroe?" Lila asked, a teasing lilt to her voice. I considered her question for a moment, letting the warm spring breeze caress my face. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "For the first time in a long while, I don't have some grand plan or objective mapped out. I think I'd like to just live, you know? Enjoy this new lease on life, stop and smell the roses for a change." Lila's face split into a broad grin. "Sounds like a plan to me. Just promise you won't become a complete hermit, okay? I need my partner in crime around to keep me on my toes." I laughed, the sound rich and uninhibited. "Deal." As the weeks melted into months, I relished the simple joys that had once eluded me. Lazy Sunday mornings, impromptu girls' nights out with Leela and Jenna, quality time with my children. Each day was a gift, unburdened by the specter of Trent's lies and manipulation. Of course, there were moments when the past would creep up on me, uninvited flashes of pain and heartache that threatened to reopen old wounds. But I found solace in the knowledge that I had persevered, that I had taken my life back from the brink and emerged stronger than ever. Trent was little more than a ghost, a lingering shadow that grew fainter with each passing day. I refused to afford him any more power over me or my happiness. As for his ultimate fate, I cared little. Rumor had it he'd slunk off to parts unknown, his wealth and reputation in tatters. A part of me hoped he was suffering, dwelling in the pit of his own making, but the larger part simply didn't give a damn. He was a specter of the past, and I was too busy embracing my future to dwell on him any longer. With Lila by my side, I embarked on a new chapter, one filled with new adventures, new joys, and a newfound sense of liberation. The road ahead was unknown, but for the first time in ages, I greeted the uncertainty with open arms and a radiant smile. Wherever life took me, I knew one thing for certain. The specters of the past held no power over me. I was the master of my destiny, the author of my own story. And this time, I was writing one hell of an ending.